but the Pilgrims' crossing of the Atlantic Ocean in the Mayflower ship, and their landing on Plymouth Rock, and the SUV that crashed into an Apple store in Plymouth, Massachusetts, on the exact anniversary of the arrival of the Mayflower, is a prophecy from the righteous Christian God of the Bible that is predicting that U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in St. Louis into Busch Stadium on December 24th, 2024. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. As can be seen in this email, the prediction that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash has been known since at least August 5th, 2021. If you have already watched this essential introductory information that is about the prediction that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in St. Louis on December 24th, you can skip ahead 59 minutes. Do not skip ahead if you have already watched similar introductory information for the prediction of dirty bombs in New York City on December 16th, or any other prediction. This introductory information is different for each prediction, and the differences in the information is essential for each prediction. God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is only being explained on this channel. The full intended meaning of God's prophetic signs cannot be properly understood without their context and connections to other prophetic signs. God's big picture of signs is an interconnected web. It is through these connections between related prophetic signs that God is telling very important stories that are revealing very important knowledge. For example, it is through God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections that he is revealing the way in which Barack Obama will become the president again, which is through the death of Vice President Kamala Harris in a plane crash. For many years, God has been painting this particular picture through his prophetic signs, and along the way he has been developing numerous trails of connected signs that are leading to the precise date that Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash. Here is a diagram that illustrates one such example among countless examples. As we can see here, God has demonstrated a number of trails of signs that led to August 24th, 2023. It was known ahead of time that there would be a prophetic sign related to the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash on August 24th, and then on this day, Vladimir Putin was the first public official to confirm that the Russian general and leader of the Wagner Group that attempted a coup of Vladimir Putin died in a plane crash, which hints at the soft coup that has been unfolding in America in recent years. In retrospect, it could have been easily predicted that the Russian general of the Wagner Group would die in a plane crash on August 24th, because it was known that August 24th is 54 days before October 17th, which was another date God was pointing to ahead of time. This is why on August 24th, Trump, God's trumpet, had in 5 months been arrested for the 4th time in the 4th state. It also hinted at the number 54. God has been using in his signs the theme of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment to fight in the Civil War, who were known for fighting valiantly at Fort Wagner. Hence the Wagner plane crash 54 days before October 17th. As we can see in this diagram, the trail of signs continues on from August 24th to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on February 24th. This is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. And this theme of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment is an example of a story that God is telling that is extremely important. Actually, February 24th ended up being another step in the trail of signs that is leading to November 27th. The date 224 hints at 2 times 24 and hints at G 2424 in Strong's Greek Bible Concordance, which is the Greek word for the name Jesus. Greek letters are also numbers, and the numeric value of the name Jesus in Greek is equal to 888. The number 24 is 8 plus 8 plus 8. The other prophetic signs on February 24th also revealed the number 8. This includes the S&P 500 stock market index's close for the weekend at 5,088.80. The stock market closed at 5,088.80 points because the most central prophecy in the Bible describes a period of time between the decree to rebuild Jerusalem and Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem in his first coming. From the text of the prophecy, it is straightforward that this period of time is 5,888 moon cycles, which means that the year of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem in his first coming was a year in which there was an extra month of Adar in the Hebrew calendar. The year 30, 31, and 33 AD did not have an extra month of Adar. This is one clear reason for how it is indisputable that the year of Jesus' triumphal entry and his death and resurrection was in 32 AD. This prophetic stock market sign also proves this. And the Boston Celtics basketball team's 8th win in a row, giving them an 8-game lead over the next team, and the dangerous basketball court storming incident after the 8th ranked Blue Devils college basketball team lost to the Deacon Demons in an upset. Also on February 24th, Trump won the primary for the 8th state to join the Union when he beat the former governor of the 8th state. Trump campaigned in the capital of the 8th state on the day of Harris's third visit to the 8th state this year, which hinted at 3 8s and 888. The name Trump in Simple English Gematria is equal to 88. Donald J. Trump in English Gematria is equal to 888. The S&P 500 stock market index close at 5,088.80 on February 24th hinted at adding 5 times 8 days from February 24th to reach April 4th. As well, one of the many trails of signs that led to February 24th, when the S&P 500 was closed at 5,088.80, was the 13 days connection from Super Bowl 58, in which Taylor Swift, who is known for being obsessed with the number 13, attended her 13th Chiefs game this season. Super Bowl 58 hints at 5 plus 8 equals 13, and also hints at the addition of 5 times 8 days to February 24th, which was 13 days after Super Bowl 58. Also, when the S&P 500 stock market index closed at 5,088.80 points, it was 5 plus 8 days after Super Bowl 58. The reason for all of these 5s and 8s is that it points to the prophecy in the Bible in Revelation 17:11 that regards a 5th and an 8th king. The 58th triangular number in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 58th row, is 1,711, which hints at the 5th and 8th kings in the book of Revelation in chapter 17:11. In this prophecy, the 7th king is Pope Francis, and the 8th king is a revived Roman Empire in which the seat of political power of the Western nations will once again be Rome. This is why the football team from San Francisco played in Super Bowl 58. San Francisco hints at Pope Francis. Pope Francis was elected pope on the date 313, exactly 85 years after the catastrophic failure of the St. Francis Dam in Los Angeles, one of the worst civil engineering disasters in U.S. history. 85 years hints at the 5th through 8th king's prophecy. President Carter was the first to host a pope at the White House. He was the 39th president. 39 is 3 times 13, which hints at the date 313, the dates on which Pope Francis was elected pope, and the collapse of the St. Francis Dam. Rome converted to Catholicism in 313 AD. The 39th president is predicted to die 11 months and 17 days after Super Bowl 58, and 11 months and 17 days hints at Revelation 17:11, which is the prophecy that regards the 5th through 8th kings, which is why in this Super Bowl, San Francisco played the Chiefs. The prophecy in Revelation 17:11 regarding a 5th and an 8th king is for the purpose of identifying the Antichrist and his Antichrist system through the 7th and 8th kings in this prophecy. This is why Super Bowl 58, in which the team from San Francisco played, was exactly 87 days after Pope Francis turned 87 years old. The number 87 hints at the 7th and 8th kings. In God's signs, mass shootings involving bullets that come out of guns and go into people are symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing that comes out of things and goes into people. In other words, gun SHOs are symbolic of the SHOs. In Bible prophecy, the mark of the Antichrist is used to test the faith of God's people. This is why on the same day as the Super Bowl 58 involving San Francisco was the attempted mass shooting in the famous megachurch in Harris County, led by Joel Osteen, who was born exactly 50 years and 8 days before Pope Francis was elected pope. The quarterback for San Francisco wears jersey number 13, and his name is Brock. And the team from San Francisco played the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. This is because the two chiefs, the two antichrists, are described in Revelation chapter 13. And the second chief antichrist is Barak, for which the name Barak hints at. The number associated with the Antichrist is 666, and this is why Super Bowl 58 was the first Super Bowl to be played in Nevada, the 36th state to join the Union. The number 36 hints at 3 sixes, and it is 6 times 6, and 2 plus 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6, and the 36th triangular number. In a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666, and 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. 5 times 8 days after the stock market was closed at 5,088.80 points, on the day that we received many signs involving the number 8, was the date 4/4, April 4th. The Antichrist is the 44th president, and also the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school. It is predicted that the 44th president will become the president again after the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, and the date 4/4 in 2024 was exactly 2 times 3 years, which hints at the number 23, after the crash of the Thunderbird's jet that was number 4 in its squad on the date 4/4 in 2018. Thunderbird's jets are F-16s, which hints at 4 times 4. This Thunderbird's jet crashed in the 36th state, and the number 36 hints at 666, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. Alaska is the 49th state to join the Union. The 49th vice president is predicted to die in a plane crash, which will lead to the return of the 44th president to the White House. And on the date 4/4, Alaska Airlines announced that it had received 4 times $4 million from Boeing for the door that blew out of its plane in January. This announcement regarding 4 times $4 million on the date 4/4 was exactly 4 times 4 days before 2 Japanese military helicopters collided and crashed. 4 plus 4 Japanese military crew died in the crash. This is amazing because 4,444% of a year before Alaska Airlines announced on the date 4/4 that 4 times $4 million was received from the aircraft manufacturer was the beginning of the 444-day Iran hostage crisis on 11/4 in 1979. The date 11/4 hints at 11 times 4 equals 44. The 444-day Iran hostage crisis led to Operation Eagle Claw, a covert military operation that attempted to rescue the hostages in Tehran, which failed when one of the U.S. helicopters collided with another U.S. military aircraft in a fiery explosion that killed 4 plus 4 and injured 4 U.S. military servicemen. This occurred in the Iranian desert, where a civilian bus drove by during the operation, resulting in 44 Iranian captives for the brief period of time. President Jimmy Carter made the decision to abort Operation Eagle Claw after only 5 out of the 8 helicopters remained operational, which hinted at the 5th through 8th Kings Bible prophecy. A parallel of this prophecy identifies the 44th president as the future 8th president king after a series of 7 presidents that began with Carter's inauguration in 77. More regarding the 5th through 8th Kings prophecy is explained in the Jimmy Carter videos. 4,444% of a year after the beginning of the 444-day Iran hostage crisis, Alaska Airlines announced on the date 4/4 that it had received 4 times $4 million from the aircraft manufacturer, and this date 4/4 is 4 times 4% of a year before it is predicted that the 49th vice president will die in a plane crash on November 27, 2024. All right, just as February 24th was a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, a date that God was pointing to in advance. Likewise, God was also pointing to November 27th, 2024 in advance, and it too was an important step in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash 9 plus 9 plus 9 days later. This diagram that you are looking at here is truly profound, and there is a lot to explain. And God, through all of this, told very important and amazing stories that everyone needs to know. And this diagram and the full explanation for what happened and why it is relevant, what happened, the prophetic signs that occurred on November 27th, are explained in the 9/11 Mayor video. The video that is titled Trump Will Die, Prediction Trump will die on December 12th, Harris will crash on December 24th, equals the 9/11 Mayor, a man that God is using in his prophetic signs for very important symbolism, which points to the big warning of judgment on 9/11. Most importantly, that is the underlying symbolism, but there is so much that God has told through the 9/11 Mare, which will be explained in the 9/11 Mare video. But for the sake of continuity in this video, to explain the trail of signs, as I have just now explained, we have established a trail of signs that led to November 27th. November 27th is 9 + 9 + 9 days before December 24th, the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. God pairs 9 and 11 together to confirm the signs and connections, and that is because it points to 9/11. And that's why we have this connection involving 9 and 11 and the 9/11 Mare. On this day, the 9/11 Mare stood outside of the courthouse that he is being persecuted in by his political enemies in New York City in the 11th state. New York City, incidentally, is also made up of 11 letters. On 9/11, it was Flight 11 with a crew of 11 people that flew into the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11 in New York State, the 11th state to join the Union, because Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, which in ancient Israel referred to the last hour of daylight before darkness, and in English is an idiom that means last chance. Time is running out. And so the prophetic sign that we expected in advance was Rudy Giuliani, the 9/11 Mayor, announcing to the world in front of the press, in front of the courthouse, where he is being persecuted, that he no longer has a bank account. And this date, a primary reason why or how this date was known ahead of time was because of the connection to the Emergencies Act with the trucker freedom protest in Ottawa, which was about the restriction or restricting of the political dissidents' bank accounts. It was exactly 145 weeks in between these two signs involving bank accounts, because 145 is the 49th semi-prime number, and we are talking about the death of Kamala Harris, the 49th vice president. There's lots to say. The trucker protest was a convoy of trucks across the continent parallel to the border wall of security with America, the 49th parallel. 49 is 7 times 7. The trucker protest began exactly 7 times 7 years after 7 justices voted to legalize abortions in the Supreme Court, and Harris is most known for advocacy for abortions. To wrap things up here, this was Thanksgiving. This date was known ahead of time because it was the day before Thanksgiving. Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash the day before Christmas on her flight back from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. Again, God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, which is the reason for 9 + 9 + 9 days connected to this sign in New York. And it is relevant that it is in New York, because also it connects to the day that the New York State Bar removed Giuliani's law license in New York State. And also this date is exactly 211 weeks after this other 9/11 Mayor sign, and on, and 211 hints at 2 times 110 stories of the Twin Towers that collapsed on 9/11. 211 is the 15th super prime number. Rudy Giuliani was sued for $150 million, which is why he doesn't have a bank account. And this date is predicted to be 15 days before it is predicted that Trump, who is from New York and Manhattan, also will die. This connection of 211 weeks, which I can't explain much more, this end of the diagram in this video, it's explained in the Giuliani 9/11 Mayor video, but this connection is also 404% of a calendar year. This 9/11 Mayor sign was on the exact 400-year anniversary of the Pilgrims anchoring off Cape Cod and signing the Mayflower Compact, the predecessor to the Constitution. The sign on this date, this 9/11 Mayor sign on the date 11/11, the Mayflower Compact was signed on the date 11/11, exactly 400 years earlier. This sign on this date was Giuliani's podcast, in which he, for the first time, laid out a comprehensive case of all of the evidence that the referendum had been shoplifted, which meant the end of democracy. This symbolized the beginning of democracy, and the end of democracy was symbolized with the 9/11 mayor and his case regarding the evidence on this day. And of course, the reason why Giuliani doesn't have a bank account and was sued this amount of money was for speaking the truth regarding the shoplifted referendum. And also, this 9/11 mayor sign on this date was 404 years after the Pilgrims arrived, and the Pilgrims symbolized Thanksgiving, and again, this was the Thanksgiving sign that we expected in advance. 404 years and 404% of a calendar year hint at the 44th president, the Antichrist, who is symbolized by the king of Egypt in the Bible, and the Israelites escaped the persecution from the king of Egypt after 400 years in Egypt and then were led to the promised land. The Pilgrims saw their crossing of the Atlantic and their escape from the king of England and religious persecution, like the Israelites, as being analogous to the Israelites' departure from Egypt and crossing over the Jordan River into their promised land, their crossing of the Atlantic into the New World. The 44th president will become the Antichrist king after the death of Trump and Harris in a plane crash. And once he becomes the president and the Antichrist, he will restrict people's ability to buy and sell food based on their having taken or whether or not they have taken the mark of the Antichrist. In other words, bank accounts will be controlled, and this is why it is relevant that this coming death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash connects through these signs involving 9/11, which was about plane crashes, through the 9/11 mayor, and through the restriction of bank accounts of the left's political enemies, true conservatives and Christians. Returning back to this diagram, we have the 9/11 mayor sign here, and then this 9 + 9 + 9 days from this sign in the 11th state. And December 24th is also, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. This date is exactly 44 + 44 + 44 + 44 + 44 + 44 days. And the 44th president will have a second presidency. This gets us back to the date 4/4 and the Alaska Airlines announcing that it had received 4 times $4 million from Boeing. And obviously this is confirmed with these second witnesses, including this 4,444% of a year to the beginning of the 444-day Iran hostage crisis, which led to the 4+4 killed and 4 injured in the attempt to rescue the hostages. And also the 4 times $4 million announcement was on the date 4/4, 44 + 44 days after the Alaska Airlines door fell into Portland. So this is all confirmation for this connection here also to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. And again, to remind you how this all started, this is all about an explanation for how the trail that led to February 24th leads to her predicted death. And again, the date 4/4 was 8 + 8 + 8 + 8 + 8 days, 5 times 8 days after the signs involving the number 8, including the stock market sign of 5,088.80 points on February 24th. Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash next to the I-55 highway. The prophetic relevance of this is big. She will die next to the I-55 highway, and December 24th is exactly 5 + 5 months after February 24th. the most wicked king, evil king in Israel's history, as recorded in the Bible, ruled for 55 years. And the king of Egypt is symbolic of the Antichrist. And St. Louis, where Kamala Harris is predicted to die, is connected to Chicago, the home of the Antichrist, with the I-55. And St. Louis is also connected with the I-55 to Little Egypt, including Memphis, Tennessee, and the King of Rock's Graceland estate and mansion, which is symbolic of a king's palace in Memphis, Egypt. Alaska is the 49th state to join the Union, which hints at the 49th vice president. 4 times 4 days after Alaska Airlines announced 4 times $4 million on the date 4/4 was the day that 4+4 Japanese military servicemen were killed when 2 helicopters collided in a nighttime operation. The helicopter collision in Operation Eagle Claw that killed 4+4 and injured 4 occurred at night. To confirm his signs and connections, God pairs the numbers 23 and 44, as the 44th president is the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school. The Japanese helicopter collision that killed 4+4 servicemen on April 20th, 2024 is 2 times 30, which hints at 23% of a year before Harris's predicted crash. She is predicted to crash in the city with the area code 314. This 2 times 30% of a year is also 31 weeks and 4 days. Isaiah 31:4 describes the Antichrist. It mentions Egypt, and it speaks of God fighting from the air. The area code 314 is near the area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt. In God's signs, helicopter blades are symbolic of the letter X, which is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist that is described in Bible prophecy. Also, the mark of the Antichrist changes a person's chromosomes, which is symbolized by an X. An X helicopter blade hints at 4 points, and 2 helicopter blades hints at 4 and 4. The 2 helicopters and their blades that hinted at 4 and 4 crashed and killed 4+4 people 4 times 4 days after the date 4/4 and the announcement regarding 4 times $4 million. Alaska Airlines received 4 times $4 million from Boeing because of the door that blew out of its aircraft and fell onto the city of Portland. A door and Portland hint at demons crossing through the door and portal from the demonic realm into the earthly realm. The word airlines in Alaska Airlines is an anagram that hints at aliens. Demons will soon come through the portal and pretend to be aliens. Alaska Airlines announced 4 times $4 million on the date 4/4, which was 44 plus 44 days, after the door was found in a residential neighborhood of Portland. The reason why God is using Japan in his signs is that the land of the rising sun, with a sun on its flag, is symbolism for the coming catastrophic solar flare that will knock out America's power grid, and Japan is symbolism for nuclear bombs, and Japanese animation, is obsessed with spiritual beings taking possession of people, is symbolism for the coming mass demonic possession of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. In other words, in God's signs, Japan is symbolism for demonic possession, and an X is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, because the mark changes a person's chromosomes, which is symbolized by an X, and those who have taken it will soon become demonically possessed. Harris is predicted to crash in her plane in St. Louis, near where the 2 eclipses engendered an X over the nation, and an X is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist because it changes a person's chromosomes, which resemble an X. An X is two straight lines that cross each other at their midpoints. This is the reason why the symbolic middle date of the two eclipses that engendered an X over the nation was December 14th, 2020, the day that the first American outside of a trial took the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist. In God's signs, the number 188 hints at H188 in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which is the word that means woe! And this word is used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. For example, the predicted death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash in St. Louis on July 22nd, 2024, near where the paths of the eclipses crossed each other to engender an X, will be exactly 188 weeks after the middle date between the eclipses when the first American took the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist. In the Bible, judgment on a people symbolically begins at the gate. Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in St. Louis near the Gateway Arch, known as the symbolic gateway to the West. Kamala Harris was born exactly 1 year, 8 months, and 8 days, which hints at 188, after construction first began on the Gateway Arch in St. Louis. Paths of eclipses are calculated using the mathematical number of pi, which is symbolized by 3.14, and the area code of St. Louis is 314, and the date July 22nd, 722, hints at the fraction 22/7, which for mathematicians is shorthand for pi because it is the closest fraction to approach pi, 3.14, which is why Kamala Harris will die on the date 722, which hints at God's mysterious transcendental number that he has baked into his creation, the number pi. When Moses asked for God's name at the burning bush, God replied that his name is I am. This was in Exodus 3:14, and the symbol in Hebrew for I am is the exact same symbol as the symbol for pi, 3.14, which is why God gave his name in Exodus 3:14. God gave his name to Moses in Exodus 3:14 through the burning bush. The area code of St. Louis is 3.14, and the Anheuser-Busch Brewing Company is famously headquartered in St. Louis. This connection between pi and the burning bush in Exodus 3:14 is why the historic Busch Stadium is located right near the Gateway Arch in St. Louis. I wonder if Harris's predicted fiery plane crash will be into Busch Stadium, as it would symbolize a burning bush and thereby point to God. All right, the last few minutes were recorded prior to July 22nd, the date 722. July 22nd ended up being another step in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash in St. Louis on November 27th, 2024. July 22nd ended up being what the mainstream media called Harris's Day. This was the day that Biden announced he would not run for election. This was the day after Biden announced that he would not run in the election. On July 22nd, Harris received enough Democrat Party delegate votes to make her the nominee, and she raised a record $81 million in 24 hours. God uses records for his signs. 81 is a number that symbolizes the warning of God's judgment on 9/11, when 81 passengers crashed into the Twin Towers in a jet plane. 9 divided by 11, as in 9/11, equals 0.818181 into infinity. Also on July 22nd was the inaugural flight of what the Israeli media has nicknamed Israel's Air Force One plane. Israel's Air Force One brought the leader of Israel to Washington, D.C. for talks and a speech to Congress regarding Gaza. In the Bible, Philip was told to travel to Gaza, where he encountered the Ethiopian. After his encounter with the Ethiopian, Philip was raptured, or in other words, he flew in the air. The Ethiopian was the Queen of Egypt's representative. The Greek word for the Ethiopian in Strong's Bible Concordance is G128. This is why Kamala Harris will die in a crash of her Air Force Two plane on a flight from Washington, a flight that will crash near the area of the country that is nicknamed Little Egypt, exactly 128 days after Israel's Air Force One flew to Washington. It is through the death of Kamala Harris that Barack Obama will become the president again. Barack Obama was born in East Africa near Ethiopia. God is playing on the Ethiopian in the Bible and G128 in the Concordance in order to point to Barack Obama, who was born near Ethiopia exactly 128 weeks before Michelle Obama was born. After Harris's death, Joe Biden is predicted to appoint Michelle Obama as Harris's replacement. Joe Biden will then step down, and Michelle will appoint Barack as her vice president before she will step down. Donald Trump is predicted to die on December 12, 2024, before the meeting of the electors on December 17, 2024, when they are predicted to make Michelle Obama the 47th president-elect. Harris is predicted to crash in her plane in St. Louis, near where the two eclipses engendered an X over the nation, and the 99th birthday of Malcolm X, the leader of the Nation of Islam, on May 19, 2024, was 29 days after the crash of the Japanese helicopters with their rotor blades that are symbolic of an X. The number 29 is God's way of hinting at 9/11 using only two numbers, as the number 2 hints at 1 and 1. The coming mass demonic possession of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist is alluded to in the book of Revelation, and this is symbolized by the passage Revelation 9:11 about a king that rises from the bottomless pit. The mark of the Antichrist is leading to demonic possession. The mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by an X, and helicopter blades resemble an X, and Japan is symbolism for Japanese animation, which is obsessed with demonic possession. And this connection of 29 days, which hints at Revelation 9:11, between the crash of the Japanese helicopters to May 19th, the birth date of Malcolm X, the leader of the Nation of Islam, on the same day that the leader of the Nation of the Islamic Republic of Iran died in a helicopter crash, which I will explain in a minute. Also, the day of the birthday of Malcolm X and this Iranian leader helicopter crash, and helicopters are symbolism for the X of their rotor blades, it was the 99th birthday of Malcolm X, was 45 days, and 45 is the 9th triangular number, after the Alaska Airlines reported that Boeing had given them 4 times $4 million. The reason for the significance of 45 in God's signs is that he is using this to point to its reciprocal. 1 divided by 45 is equal to 0.022. 22 is the number that God uses to symbolize the mark of the Antichrist. The inverse of the mark of the Antichrist would have been a Tav mark described in Ezekiel in the Bible, and the Tav letter, which in ancient Hebrew or Paleo-Hebrew was an X, the Tav letter is the last and 22nd letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last and 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. And that's the beginning of the reason for the number 22 being symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, which again is leading to mass demonic possession, which is why the report of Alaska Airlines receiving 4 times $4 million from Boeing was 44 plus 44 days after the Boeing plane that Alaska Airlines owned, its door blew out and landed, or rather it was discovered on this day. The door was found in Portland because demons will cross through the door, the portal, into the earthly realm, and there will be a mass demonic possession of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. The birthday of Malcolm X on May 19th was 85 days after the S&P 500 stock index was closed at 5,088.80 points, which hinted at the number 58. The number 58 hints at the number 85, which is why May 19th and the birthday of Malcolm X was 85 days after the stock market hinted at the number 58. The reason why God is pointing to the death of Kamala Harris with the number 85 is that she will be replaced by Michelle Obama, who will appoint Barack Obama, and Barack Obama first moved to Chicago in 85 after the May 19th Communist Organization was disbanded in 85. This is the reason why Obama hosted the 85 Chicago Bears, as in the 1985 Chicago Bears, at the White House on the Day of Atonement in the Hebrew calendar, exactly 13 years before the Antichrist Obama will be defeated at the Lord's second coming on the Day of Atonement in 2024. The Antichrist is described in the 13th chapter of the book of Revelation, and 8 plus 5 equals 13. The 85 Chicago Bears lost only one game in their season, and that was in week 13 of the season. The loss was because of Miami Dolphins quarterback number 13. 13 years before the 85 Chicago Bears, the Miami Dolphins became the only team to achieve an undefeated season. Dolphins player number 13 was the Super Bowl MVP that year. In the Bible, 30 years is symbolic of a king. Obama is well known for being a fan of Chicago sports teams. The 85 Chicago Bears Super Bowl win in January of 1986 began a 30-year cycle in which all of the major sports teams from Chicago won their league's championship. This included the Chicago Blackhawks, the Chicago White Sox, and Chicago Cubs, all of which ended severe droughts of championship wins and ended supposed sports curses, which hinted at the curse of the Antichrist. The 30-year pattern was fulfilled 4 days before the 44th president's last day in the White House, when he was presented with jersey number 44 by star player number 44 of the 2016 Chicago Cubs. And 16 equals 4 times 4. Again, in the Bible, a 30-year period is symbolic of a king. Also, the Kansas City Royals have only been crowned kings of baseball twice, and their 2 World Series wins were exactly 30 years apart. Their first win was in 85. The plot of the movie Back to the Future took place in 85, and 30 years later in the future, in 2015, and the movie included a joke about the Chicago Cubs winning the World Series, which they finally did win the year after the Royals won in 2015, exactly 30 years after their first win in 85. All of this served to point to the year that the Antichrist king, Obama, moved to Chicago in '85 after the May 19th Communist Organization was disbanded in '85. The truth is that Obama was a full-fledged member of the May 19th Communist Organization, which, among other things, was responsible for bombing the Capitol building in Washington in the early 1980s. And the date of the bombing of the Capitol building was 21,600 minutes, which is 15 days, after the Beirut barracks bombings. The Beirut barracks bombings hints at Barack Obama, and the name Barack is equal to 216 in English gematria, which is what 21,600 minutes hints at. In turn, the bombing of the Capitol building by the May 19th Communist Organization on November 7th, 1983, was exactly 4 times 4 months, which hints at the 44th president, before the release of the best-selling single in history, We Are the World, sung by the celebrity singers of the day and written by the king of pop, Michael Jackson. MJ is equal to 23 in simple English gematria. MJ grew up at 2300 Jackson Street in a suburb of Chicago, where Barack Obama is from. This pairs 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections, as the 44th president wore jersey number 23 in high school basketball. The song was for charity for food aid for famine-stricken Ethiopia. Obama is the Antichrist who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist through restricting the buying and selling of the rationed food to only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, and Obama was born in East Africa near Ethiopia. The Greek word for the Ethiopian in the Bible is G128 in Strong's Greek Concordance, and Michelle Obama was born exactly 128 weeks after Barack Obama was born. And the May 19th Communist Organization originated from Bill Ayers' Weather Underground terrorist organization. And the truth is that Obama got his start in politics with the help of Bill Ayers, and Bill Ayers' father, the powerful CEO and chairman of Commonwealth Edison in Illinois, for the sole purpose and ambition of subverting the American system in a clandestine communist-style revolution. The May 19th Communist Organization was named after the birth dates of Malcolm X and Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the bloody communist revolution and civil war that was perpetrated on the population of Vietnam. I say perpetrated on the population of Vietnam because the truth is socialism and Marxism and communism in all of their forms are anti-human, is evil, and is from Satan. It is satanic. Prior to May 19th, it was predicted that on this date, Kamala Harris would die in a plane crash in St. Louis near the X engendered by the paths of totality of the 2 eclipses in 2017 and 2024 that traversed over America. One reason why there was confidence in this prediction is that it was recognized prior to May 19th that it was the anniversary of the birth of Malcolm X. The May 19th Communist Organization, responsible for bombing the Capitol building in 1983, was named after the birth dates of Ho Chi Minh and Malcolm X. Malcolm X was a leader of the radical Nation of Islam. On May 19, 2024, the radical leader of the Islamic Nation of Iran died in an aviation disaster. God has previously used helicopters in his signs because their rotor blades symbolize an X. Malcolm X was known for speaking from a podium to black male audiences. Also on May 19th, Joe Biden, the leader of the nation, which hints at leader of the Nation of Islam, spoke from a podium with a commencement speech to a black male audience at the historic black male college, Morehouse College. In other words, I predicted the precise date of the death of the leader of Iran in an aviation disaster on May 19th. Also on May 19th, the Dow Jones Stock Market Index was closed above 40,000 for the first time, and this was 40 days after the eclipse that engendered an X over the nation. The reason the Dow closed above 40,000 for the first time, 40 days after the eclipse, is that the eclipse passed over 7 cities named Nineveh, and in the Bible, Jonah preached 40 days of repentance and destruction to the Ninevites. In other words, the analysis that Kamala Harris would die in a plane crash in St. Louis near the X engendered by the 2 eclipses on May 19th was correct. In other words, the videos that are made that are titled with the prediction that Kamala Harris would die in a plane crash on May 19th are 100% correct and must be watched. May 19th was an important step in the trail of signs that God is demonstrating that is leading to the predicted death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, and through these trails of signs that led to May 19th, God told very important stories and revealed important knowledge that must be learned. There are about 50 videos related to Harris's predicted crash on this channel that predict that her plane crash will be on February 10th, 2024. Each of these videos tell a different and very important story that everyone needs to know, and these stories are developed through trails of connected signs that led to February 10th, 2024. In other words, the signs connected to February 10th, and then on February 10th, we received the prophetic sign that was expected in advance of February 10th. The prophetic sign on February 10th that was predicted in advance of February 10th was the big news of pop singer Taylor Swift's race across the Pacific Ocean in her private jet so that she could attend the Super Bowl. This prophetic plane sign and the important stories that God is telling that relate to this are explained in the must-watch Swift Super Bowl video. For example, it will be explained how Swift's race across the Pacific in her private plane, with the goal of reaching the Super Bowl in time, points to the Amelia Earhart prophetic sign and her disappearance in a private plane as she was flying across the Pacific Ocean with the goal of becoming the first woman to fly solo around the world. The Amelia Earhart video on this channel will explain how the date of Earhart's plane crash on July 2nd, the date 7/2 in 1937, confirms the addition of 7 times 2 days from Taylor Swift's race across the Pacific Ocean in her private plane on February 10th to reach the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in her private Air Force plane 7 times 2 days later as she flies across the country. After flying across the ocean, Swift landed her plane at LAX Airport in Los Angeles, and Harris is predicted to crash in St. Louis, near where the paths of the 2 great American eclipses will engender an X, on her flight path from Washington, D.C. to LAX. What I am saying is that when this prediction comes to pass, you should know that you need to watch every minute of every video on this channel, including all 50 of the videos that tell the different stories from God through different trails of signs that led to February 10th. Then watch the Swift Super Bowl video that explains the signs that occurred on February 10th and how they point to the date of Harris's predicted crash on November 27th. What I am saying is that the videos in which it was predicted that Kamala Harris would die in a plane crash on February 10th are 100% correct. What I am saying is do not skip these videos that are predicting February 10th. They must be watched. If you do not watch these videos and learn about the important stories God has been telling, you will have missed entirely the point of this prediction that is from God for Harris's death in a plane crash. Believe me, I know far better than you why God is giving this prediction, and it is so that you learn the information that is contained in these 50 other videos that predicted February 10th. Let's begin with this date and this date. These two dates were known ahead of time to be relevant related to the predicted day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. It was known ahead of time that these two dates were 54 days apart. This is why it could have been predicted ahead of time that this would be the date that the Russian general leader of the Wagner group would die in a plane crash. This is because the 54th Massachusetts Regiment in the Civil War fought valiantly at Fort Wagner. The 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment, was infamously not paid the $13 that the other white Union soldiers were paid, and this is what is hinted at with this 130 days connection. 130 hints at the number 13. On this date, Hamas fired one of its own rockets at one of its hospitals, killing hundreds of people, and in Hebrew gematria, Hamas equals 130, which confirms this 130 days connection, and Hamas hints at Harris, who is predicted to die in a plane crash after the explosion of her plane's engine. Because of this explosion in Gaza, the four-party summit talk was canceled right as Biden was boarding his Air Force One plane, and this was also the day that Kamala Harris boarded her Air Force Two plane and flew to the Four Corners region for a talk at a university. This alluded to the four horns and four craftsmen described in the first chapter of the book of Zechariah, the main verse of which is 1:17, which is what the date 1017 hinted at. God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, and this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. If we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9, 23, and 44. This is because the Antichrist is the 44th president who became the president in 2009 and is the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. Also, the mark of the Antichrist is alluded to in Ezekiel chapter 9, and the mark of the Antichrist changes a person's 23 chromosomes. It is predicted that after Kamala Harris's plane crash, Michelle Obama will replace her and become the Queen of America. This is why exactly 9 months before Harris's predicted death was the day that the Queen of Rock and Roll, Tina Turner, died at the age of 83, and 83 is the 23rd prime number, which pairs with this 9 months to confirm the signs and connections. Tina Turner died in Switzerland, and she is known for having traded in her U.S. citizenship for Swiss citizenship. Switzerland is symbolic of mountains and a high place, and Kamala Harris will die after her plane falls from the sky, a high place. The word Obama in Hebrew means from a high place. Tina Turner staged her big comeback at the age of 44, and God uses records for his signs, and Tina Turner became the oldest person to have a #1 hit, What's Love Got to Do With It, on the top 100 Billboard chart at the age of 44, which pairs with this 23 and 9 months connection. She also holds the record of largest paying concert attendance at 180,000, which is 60 plus 60 plus 60,000, which hints at 666, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash exactly 2 times 3 months, which hints at 23 and pairs with this 9 months connection after the day that the Russian general leader of the Wagner Group died in a plane crash, on the day that Trump, God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs, was arrested for the 4th time in the 4th state to join the Union, which hints at the number 44 and pairs with this 2 times 3 months, which hints at 23, to confirm these signs and connections. God's prophetic signs cannot be fully and properly understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs. It is an interconnected web. This diagram illustrates how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on signs connecting to other relevant related signs and produces trails of signs through which God tells very important stories that everyone needs to know. This is why, for example, this trail of signs right here that points to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment that wasn't paid the $13 that the white soldiers were paid is preceded by this connection to the day that a truck crashed into the Apple store in Plymouth, Massachusetts. The reason why the Apple store is relevant and why this crash connects to the day that Kamala Harris is predicted to crash is because the Apple store hints at smartphones and the internet, which will be used to enforce the mark of the Antichrist, which is why the first Apple computer sold for $666.66. The unfair pay for the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment in the Civil War that was not paid the $13 that the white Union soldiers were paid, is an example of oppressive minority law. Apple hints at food and the mark of the Antichrist through smartphones, and paying with digital currency will be enforced through rationing of food. Only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist will be entitled to buy or sell the rationed food, which will be an oppressive minority law. This is also the reason for the currency, the $13, in this prophetic sign. The first black regiment hints at the first black president, the Antichrist, who on his 54th birthday as president was in Chicago, his hometown, and while he was in Chicago on his birthday, 4 sisters had 4 babies in 4 days, which hinted at the 44th president who is from Chicago. Chicago in English gematria is 276. This is one reason for this 276 days connection to the 4th arrest in the 4th state. 276 is the 23rd triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 23rd row is 276. Hence, this pairs with the 44 in the 4th arrest in the 4th state. A man drove his 4x4 Toyota 4Runner and crashed it into the Apple store, killing 1 person and injuring 22 for a total of 23 people, making this 4x4 4Runner and 23 people a pairing with this 23rd triangular number. 22 people were injured because the number 22 in God's signs symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. Plymouth, Massachusetts symbolizes the spiritual founding of America and the Pilgrims who landed on Plymouth Rock. The Pilgrims arrived and anchored off of Cape Cod exactly 402 years before the crash into the Apple Store in Plymouth, because 402 years hints at 42 months, the symbolic period of time of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. This 276 number is prophetic because in the Bible, 276 souls were shipwrecked. This connects to the ship of the Mayflower that brought the Pilgrims across the Atlantic, who chose to anchor off of Cape Cod instead of continuing to Virginia in order to avoid being shipwrecked. It connects to the crash of the 4x4 Forerunner into the Apple Store in Plymouth, a type of shipwreck, and it connects to the ship, Kamala Harris's plane, that is predicted to crash. This exact 2 times 3 months to Harris's predicted crash from Wagner's plane crash is preceded by exactly 44 months, which pairs with this 23 and also pairs with this 4th arrest in the 4th state, to the day it was reported in the national news that 9 earthquakes had occurred within 24 hours in California. This 9 pairs with the 44 to confirm the signs and connections. This 24-hour period coincided with Christmas Eve into Christmas morning. The number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment, and these 9 earthquakes that coincided with Christmas Eve and Christmas morning hinted at the coming judgment upon Christ's return. And on the day of these 9 earthquakes in California, Kamala Harris was the senator from California. In the Bible, the falling of trees is symbolic of national judgment, and on this same day as the 9 earthquakes, an old-growth tree that had been standing since the founding of America in Muir Woods National Park fell on a hiker, killing him, and he was pronounced dead 23 minutes after the call was made to 911. This 23 minutes pairs with the 9 earthquakes. The hiker was Indian American, and Kamala Harris is also Indian American. In other words, this death hinted at the death of Kamala Harris, who is of Indian descent. 9 and 23 are paired together to confirm the signs and connections, and Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash exactly 2 times 3 months after the Russian general died in a plane crash, which was exactly 9 weeks after 9 search and rescue ships were disbanded that were 900 miles off the coast of Cape Cod, when it was finally learned the fate of the Titanic sub that had imploded, which is symbolic of an explosion and a crash of a vehicle and hints at Kamala Harris's plane crash. The 9 ships and 900 miles pairs with 9 weeks, as does the fact that the wreckage of the sub was discovered 4 times 400 feet from the bow of the Titanic. This hints at 44 and pairs with the 9. The big story regarding this Titanic sub was the urgent, dramatic search and rescue effort for the 5 people in the sub that had 4 days of oxygen, which hinted at 54, and this connects to the death of Wagner, which is then followed by 54 days, which hints at the 54th Regiment that fought at Fort Wagner. The wreckage of the sub was discovered at the sandy bottom of the ocean, and this search and rescue effort was called off exactly 23 weeks, which pairs with this 9 weeks after the day that Julian Sands, which hints at the sandy bottom of the ocean, disappeared on a mountain. The famous actor disappeared on a mountain, and a search and rescue effort began, which parallels the search and rescue effort for the Titanic sub. Julian Sands' accident on the height of a mountain hints at the implosion of the sub at the depth of the Titanic, which hints at the crash of Kamala Harris's airplane from a high height, which hints at the coming authoritarian tracking of people's locations through their cell phones, and the enforcement of the mark of the Antichrist through their cell phones. Julian Sands' big break in Hollywood movies was his role in the movie A Room with a View, which was nominated for Academy Awards, and A Room with a View is exactly what the Titanic submarine was. It was a room with a view of the sunken Titanic. Julian Sands' most famous role was of him as the warlock in the movie Warlock, which hints at the coming sorcery of the Antichrist and his allegiance to Satan, who became president in 2009 and wore jersey 23, which is the reason for these connections of 23 weeks and 9 weeks from the disappearance of Julian Sands. The search and rescue effort for Julian Sands was called off after his body was found just 3 days after the search and rescue effort for the Titanic sub was called off after the wreckage of the sub was found. Sands' body was discovered on the height of a mountain, and the sub was discovered at the depth of the ocean. 2,520 days is symbolic of the period of the end times and the Antichrist in Bible prophecy, which is what is hinted at with this 2,520 hours connection, which connects to the death of the Wagner general, which hints at the 54th Massachusetts Regiment that fought at Fort Wagner and was not paid the equivalent that the white soldiers were paid, which was oppressive minority law, through currency. And this is why this connects to the date that Daniel Penny, which hints at money, was finally charged for choking to death on a subway in New York City when he was restraining a homeless person who was known for impersonating Michael Jackson, MJ. MJ in Simple English Gematria is 23, and Michael Jackson famously grew up with his Jackson siblings at 2300 Jackson Street in Chicago, where Michael Jordan, another MJ, famously wore jersey number 23 while playing for the Chicago Bulls, and Chicago is the hometown of Barack Obama, who also wore jersey number 23. And Chicago in English Gematria is 276, the 23rd triangular number, and MJ in Simple English Gematria is 23. President Grover Cleveland was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms. He skipped the 23rd presidency, just like how Barack Obama will also serve non-consecutive terms, skipping the 45th presidency, and 45 is the 9th triangular number, making this a pairing of 9 and 23. This was also the day that the cheaters in the Cleveland fishing scandal, in the Cleveland fishing tournament scandal, were sentenced and were ordered to forfeit their $130,000 boat that they had won in a tournament, and $130,000 hints at the $13 that the 54th Massachusetts Regiment wasn't paid. This was also the day that the man in California, where Kamala Harris is from and where it is predicted that she will be flying from, pleaded guilty to intentionally crashing his plane in order to promote a wallet on YouTube. The wallet and the $130,000 and Daniel Penny all hint at currency and the 54th Massachusetts Regiment and the enforcement of the mark of the Antichrist through digital currency. In Bible prophecy, 42 months is symbolic of the period of the Antichrist, and also on this date, the section of Title 42 regarding the CVD disease and the nation's border wall of security expired, and the invasion of illegal aliens is a parallel with the walls of security that collapsed on the ancient city of Jericho in God's judgment in the Bible. And Title 42, which hints at the Antichrist, is a second witness to this 2,520 number, which in Bible prophecy is also symbolic of the period of the Antichrist. This date is 119 days, which hints at 9/11, the day of the big warning of judgment, and the collapse of the World Trade Center, as in buying and selling food. And 119 days is also 17 weeks, and the two World Trade Center towers were hit by planes 17 minutes apart to the day that Lisa Marie died, the king of rock and roll's daughter, and the king of rock and roll named his very famous airplane Lisa Marie, making the death of Lisa Marie a prophetic sign pointing to the death of Kamala Harris in an airplane crash. Elvis was fond of gold. He famously furnished the inside of his plane with gold, including the bathroom fixtures. In his famous Graceland estate, there is the Hall of Gold where he has hung his gold albums. He famously wore a gold suit, which is why on the day that Lisa Marie died, gold closed at exactly 1,923.00, which is astounding because it closed at an exact number with 0 cents, and 923 is a pairing of 9 and 23, which confirms the signs and connection. As well, gold on this day gained exactly $1.30, which hints at the $13 that the 54th Massachusetts Regiment wasn't paid. And this trail of signs, this story God is telling, is pointing to the digital currency that will be used to enforce the mark of the Antichrist by the Antichrist King, Barack Obama. Gold is the currency that God created for man that cannot be manipulated and cannot be controlled by a centralized government. The Antichrist is the 44th president who will come to power after the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, which is why exactly 4 times 4 weeks after the death of Lisa Marie, at the age of 54, by the way, which hints at the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, was the date 5/4, when 5 horses had died in 4 days at the Kentucky Derby racetrack, and the 4th inmate named Harris was captured at the I-55 highway, which also hinted at 54 on this date 5/4. The 4th escaped inmate was captured next to the I-55 highway right near Elvis's Graceland estate, which is where Lisa Marie was after she had just landed on the Lisa Marie plane when Elvis died. And within 5 days, 4 horses died at the Kentucky Derby racetrack right near where President Lincoln was born. On this 5/4 date, on which 5 horses had died in 4 days near the birthplace of President Lincoln, the 16th president, which hints at 4 times 4 and the number 44, hence the connection of 4 times 4 weeks on each side of this date. On this 5/4 date was the National Day of Prayer, which was initiated by President Lincoln with his Proclamation 97, in which he warned that God would judge and destroy America if it were to continue in unrighteousness. And 97 is the 25th prime number, which hints at the 25th Amendment, which will be used to replace Kamala Harris and make the 44th president the president again. The Wagner plane crash was 1,109 days after Biden announced that Kamala Harris would be his vice presidential running mate, and God pairs 110 and 9 together to point to 9/11, as explained in other videos. Kamala Harris is the 49th vice president, which is why her symbolic beginning as vice president on the day of Biden's announcement was exactly 227 months after 9/11, the day of the plane crashes and the collapse of 110 stories, as in the 110 and 9 pairing. Joshua died at the age of 110, and he led the Israelites around Jericho before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment after they blew trumpets. And after the 110 stories collapsed on 9/11, Trump, God's trumpet, famously called in, trumpeted to Channel 9 News and trumpeted how his tower on Wall Street had become the tallest tower in Lower Manhattan, which is one reason why God pairs 9 and 110 together to point to 9/11. 227 is the 49th prime number, which is why it connects to the rise of the 49th vice president. Kamala Harris's plane crash is predicted to be in St. Louis, which is why exactly 4 times 4 months before her crash was the day of the school shooting in St. Louis by a man named Orlando Harris. In the movie Flight, the name of the character played by Denzel Washington, as in Harris in Washington, D.C., is Alonzo Harris. The movie Flight is about a plane crash. In the shooting, there were 3 deaths and 7 injured. This is a typo. This hinted at 3 sets of 7 because in the book of Joshua in the Bible, the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. The Israelites marched around Jericho once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day, they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. It was a 3 sets of 7, and this is why this school shooting is exactly 2 plus 3 months, which hints at 23, which pairs with this 4 times 4 months after this other infamous school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, in which 7 plus 7 plus 7 people were killed, 3 sets of 7. The story of this shooting is how the shooter managed to get inside the locked school. He breached the security perimeter, the wall of security around the school. Uvalde is situated precisely between the border wall of security with Mexico and San Antonio, which is known for its Battle of the Alamo, in which the security walls of Alamo were breached. This is why this Alamo, Texas border wall of security sign that killed 7 plus 7 plus 7 people, as in the walls of security in the book of Joshua, that collapsed in God's judgment, was exactly 7 plus 7 plus 7 days, as in 21 days, as in 21 people killed, after the infamous breach of security at the Supreme Court of the U.S. This regarded their ruling on abortions, which was confirmation that mass school shootings have been judgment from God for abortions. The murder of people's children in schools is judgment for their condoning of murder of unborn babies. This is why the big promoter of abortion rights, Vice President Kamala Harris, is predicted to die exactly 21 months after 21 people were killed in the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, which was near the border wall of security, which is why 21 months is 7 plus 7 plus 7 months, and why it connects to the Supreme Court's breach of security with 7 plus 7 plus 7 days. America's walls of security have been breached, and the Antichrist will soon become the president again after it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived, and more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.